Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy is a cinematic masterpiece, but in order to adapt a 1,000-page epic, sacrifices had to be made. Unfortunately, a lot of times those sacrifices were key characters. You see, in film, you typically focus on a set number of characters who are integral to the plot, people that the viewer will see over and over again throughout the story. This simplifies things and helps the emotional attachment stay on the main cast. However, in a novel, you can expand on this and include interesting people throughout the entire story, who might only appear on 1 or 2 pages. And Tolkien was an expert at this. As Lord of the Rings fans know, Tolkien meticulously crafted Middle-earth and all of its peoples. He steeped them in lore and developed even the smallest characters, which meant that when some random guy ran into Frodo and Sam, he wasn't just a random guy. We might only read about him for a page, but Tolkien had written an entire history for that one person. And it's a shame that the movies decided to remove several characters like this, who in my opinion are just as important to the plot as the main fellowship. Similarly to Tolkien's general thesis for the story, even the smallest characters can have the biggest impact. So in today's video, join me as I reveal 11 key characters who were involved in the Lord of the Rings saga but never made it to the silver screen. And together, let's give these characters the proper celebration that they've always deserved. My name is Gibby, and welcome to Factor Fantasy, a channel dedicated to Tolkien's lore and epic stories. Each and every week, I talk about the books and movies, and we all nerd out together about the rich history of Middle-earth. So subscribe if you're interested in that, and share with a Tolkien-loving friend to help grow this community. As always, I want to give a huge shout out to Jason, Joshua, Timothy, RoboSteve, and the rest of my incredible supporters who help make these videos possible every month. And an extra special shout out to Nawil and LA Williams for being our newest members. But now let's kick things off in the Shire, as I'll try my best to cover all of these characters in chronological order of when they appeared in the story. So first up, we have Farmer Maggot. Now this one might be a bit confusing because you're probably thinking, Gibby, get your brain checked, Farmer Maggot is in the movie. Well, you're right and wrong. Technically, we hear about Farmer Maggot in the movie, and we see his Sith as he chases Merry and Pippin when they run into Frodo and Sam in the cornfields. However, his role in the book is so drastically different that I just had to include him in this list. So what does he do in the book that's so special? Well, not only is he fully shown, but he hosts the Hobbit for a meal, gives them a ride, and faces down a Nazgul. Crazy, right? Farmer Maggot might be one of the most epic hobbits in Middle-earth, but he just doesn't get the credit he deserves in the films. In Chapter 4 of the first book, Frodo, Sam, and Pippin are on their way to Crick Hollow, which is the home that Frodo purchased as a cover story for his disappearance. Merry and Fatty Bolger are waiting at Crick Hollow for the other 3 hobbits. As Frodo, Sam, and Pippin are journeying along, they eventually come upon Farmer Maggot's land, and Pippin says that they should go talk to him because Merry is quite good friends with him. Frodo is scared because in his youth he was a mushroom thief, and he got threatened by Maggot's dogs. But eventually they go to the old farmer's home, and Maggot invites them in for supper. During the supper, Farmer Maggot tells Frodo about the strange folk about, and explains his encounter with a Nazgul, who visited earlier that day asking for Baggins. Maggot told the Nazgul to leave and not come back, or else he'd sick his dogs on him, even after the Wraith offered him gold. And this just goes to show how epic Farmer Maggot is. Then after supper, Maggot gave the 3 hobbits a ride to Buckleberry Ferry and sent a basket of mushrooms with them as a gift. Farmer Maggot and his wife are essentially the focus of this entire chapter in the book, and Tolkien makes sure to establish this old hobbit as wise and stout of heart. Later on, when Frodo is with Tom Bombadil, Tom even says that Maggot has wisdom in his bones and both his eyes are open, which is high praise from essentially a godlike figure. So now you probably better understand why I don't really count the appearance of Maggot in the movie as the real thing. It's so incredibly different from the wise old hobbit we read about in the book, who lends a helping hand to our younger hobbits in need. But enough of him, we've still got 9 more people to cover. So let's move on to our missing character number 2. Now we're still in the Shire because next on the list is a hobbit who I just mentioned, Fredegar Bolger, also known as Fatty. And if you're a movie-only fan, you're probably scratching your head thinking, who in the world is that? And honestly, that's the whole point. Fatty is 100% a book-only character, and man does he play a super important role, without ever leaving the Shire, mind you. So what's his deal? Well, Fatty is one of the original conspirators, along with Merry, Pippin, and Sam, who knows Frodo is leaving with the ring. He even helps Frodo pack up Bag End and move to Crick Hollow. But here's the thing. Fatty has zero desire to go trekking off into the wild. He's a hobbit who loves his comfort, and he's staying put, but he still wants to do his part to help his friend. So he agrees to stay behind at Frodo's new house in Crick Hollow all by himself. His job is just to keep up appearances, making it seem like Mr. Baggins is still in the residence and hasn't left. Sounds like an easy gig, right? Wrong. We learn in the book that around a week after Frodo left, 3 Nazgul attacked the home, having figured out that it's where Baggins had gone. Fatty, aka Fake Frodo, quickly ran out the back door and sounded the horn call of Buckland. This alarm essentially woke up the entire surroundings and caused the Nazgul to flee, as they weren't prepared to take on the entire countryside. Now this alone earns Fatty a place in the Hobbit Hall of Fame. He risked his life by impersonating the very hobbit that Sauron was after. And he bought Frodo an extra week of time by tricking 3 of the Nazgul that he was still home. But guess what? This isn't where Fatty's role stops. At the end of the story, the hobbits return for the scouring of the Shire. I won't dive into all of that right now, but the short of it is that Saruman took over the Shire with some ruffians and enslaved the hobbits. Anyway, Frodo and the others learn that while this was occurring, Fatty led a band of rebels who resisted Saruman's control. This eventually got him locked up, and by the time Frodo freed him, he had lost all of his weight from starvation, and the name Fatty no longer applied. So despite Fredegar Bolger not wanting to venture into the wild, he still had his fair share of adventure while within the borders of the Shire. And on that note, let's jump into our third character. Finally, we're making our way outside of the Shire as Frodo and the others head into the Old Forest, and they run into the enigmatic Tom Bombadil. Honestly, I'm not going to spend too much time on him because I think by this point everyone already knows Tom pretty well. In fact, I'll point you to 2 other videos I've already made, which will be linked in the description. And actually, now that I think about it, I'm just going to link videos for each of these characters in the description below. Because of my series Movies vs. Manuscripts, in which I compare the books to the movies, I've already talked about a lot of these people individually. So if you want to dive deeper than what we're doing today for each of these characters, check out those links below. Anyway, all I'll say about Tom here is that he is an enigma who lives in the Old Forest, and he plays a more important role than people give him credit for. Specifically, he's the reason that Merry gets a Barrow Blade, which essentially is a magical dagger that has the power to kill the Witch King, and it eventually does during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields. So despite Tom being somewhat unnecessary, this blade is very key to the plot, and it wouldn't have happened without the Old Forest subplot. But again, for more info on Tom, check out the 2 videos linked in the description. Next up, our 4th omitted character is one who gets commented on almost every single one of my polls on the channel, and that person is of course Glorfindel. As diehard Tolkien fans know, Glorfindel is epic. Plain and simple. Now, because I don't have time to talk about him for 20 minutes in this video, I'm going to abstain from covering his complete lore. If you'd like a video on him specifically, drop a comment below. For this video, I'm going to explain how he was cut from the movie and what he does that is so epic and important in the story as it pertains to Frodo. So if we fast forward through the Old Forest, Frodo's time in Buri, and his injury on Weathertop, we come to a few weeks later as Aragorn is hiking with the hobbits in the wild. Frodo is still injured, and he's slowly turning into a wraith day by day. So who comes to save the day? If you said Arwen, you'd be wrong. In the book, Arwen doesn't ride out to rescue Frodo, and she never would, as that's totally out of character for Book Arwen. Instead, the hero is an elf named Glorfindel, one of the eldest of his race. An elf so epic that he died in the First Age, was favored by the Valar, and subsequently sent back to Middle-earth in the Third Age. Glorfindel lived in Rivendell, and after receiving word from Gildor, a character who we're not covering today, that Frodo was being pursued by the 9 Nazgul, Glorfindel set out to rescue him. It is said that Glorfindel was one of the few who could face the 9 Nazgul, and he actually faced them before he ever got to Frodo. He rode out and found 3 Nazgul waiting for Aragorn and the hobbits, so he chased them off, and then he found 2 more, one of which was the Witch King, and they also fled from him. Then, similarly to the movie, Glorfindel got to Frodo and helped escort Aragorn and company to Rivendell. After the Nazgul returned and chased after them, Frodo rode off on the horse alone, and as he crossed the river, he looked back to the shore to see a shining light fighting off dark figures. That shining light was Glorfindel, and Frodo was seeing him in his true spirit form. Even Gandalf later on has great things to say about the elf, almost revering him as much as the Lady Galadriel and Elrond. Like I said, I can't dive into his deeper lore today, but Glorfindel is a prime example of a key character who got cut from the movies. He was only in a couple of chapters, and because of this, Peter Jackson swapped him for Arwen. Arwen obviously was the love interest of Aragorn, and Jackson thought it would be better to put more time into her character for the films. But this was at the expense of Glorfindel, a Tolkien fan favorite. But we still have 7 more people to cover, so let's jump right into number 5 and 6 on our list. Why 5 and 6? Well, these two characters go together as they are the brothers Elrohir and Elladan, sons of Elrond. While they don't play a massive role in Frodo's journey, they are important to the overarching lore of Middle-earth. For example, they helped Aragorn as he grew up in Rivendell. Aragorn was practically the third brother. Additionally, they appear later on in the story, bringing a message to Aragorn from their father. They are the ones who first remind Aragorn to remember the paths of the dead if he is in haste. This is an integral part of the story, and they're a great example of how Tolkien was able to include a character for 1 or 2 paragraphs, but make it seem super deep and important. While one would think that they'd be easy to cut, I find myself missing them from the movies, as they really help round out Aragorn's character and Elrond's family. After all, Arwen isn't his only child. But now moving on to our 7th missing character, we have a pretty big one here, and that is Erkenbrand. Erkenbrand brings us finally to the land of Rohan. Éomer is a key character in the movies, and he's also important in the book. But what if I told you that some of Éomer's greatest moments were actually Erkenbrand in the book? Again, Peter Jackson implemented a decent amount of consolidation, giving key plot points to characters he thought were more worthy. So what does Erkenbrand do? Well, we read in the book that Erkenbrand became the commander of Rohan's western forces after the death of Theodred. He was the one who sent word of this attack to the king and requested aid, which Wormtongue denied. But what was his most notable accomplishment? Well, if you remember from the books, during the Battle of Helm's Deep, Éomer was with the king in the fortress. So when Gandalf left them to find reinforcements, he was actually finding Erkenbrand, who then rounded up about 1,000 Rohirrim from around their lands to ride to Helm's Deep. So this epic moment in the movie when Gandalf and Éomer appear and save the day is actually Erkenbrand and Gandalf in the book. Then after the king and Éomer left on their missions, Erkenbrand was put as second in command as the defender of their lands. And then after Theoden's death, Éomer became king and Erkenbrand took over as Marshal of the Westmark. Next up, we have our 8th missing character, and this time it's not just one person, but a group of people led by one person. That would be Halbarad and the Grey Company. This group is so important in the books that they get an entire chapter named after them. This company was comprised of 30 Dunedain Rangers, Aragorn's own kinsmen, people he had lived and traveled with for decades, and who shared his noble heritage. This Grey Company were the ones who protected the Shire and the North in general in secret for years upon years. And when Aragorn isn't around, Halbarad is their leader. He is the one that we hear from the most out of the group, as they meet up with Aragorn in the 3rd book and provide assistance in the war. There are 3 key actions that take place regarding this company in the books, and it's kind of crazy that they got cut entirely from the movie. First, they ride south with Elladan and Elrohir to provide aid to Aragorn. Second, Halbarad carries a great furled banner, which was made in secret by Arwen. This is Aragorn's kingly standard and a great symbol of his kingship, which he uses to hold the undead army to their oath. And the third thing they do is stay with Aragorn until the end. Literally. They travel with him through the paths of the dead, they fight the Corsairs of Umbar, and they battle on the Pelennor fields, with many of them dying, including Halbarad. This group of rangers are literally the most noble men in the entirety of Middle-earth, and they are highly skilled. When they show up, Aragorn is with Theoden, and Theoden is disappointed at first that there's only 30 of them. But then when he finds out that they are Aragorn's kinsmen, he essentially says that they are worth more than an entire battalion of soldiers, which is very true as each one was highly skilled in combat. And Halbarad himself is a legend in my book, and I'm sad that he never made it on the screen for the films. Personally, I think it could have been a pretty heart-wrenching scene if they would have had Halbarad, because he was kind of a brother to Aragorn. So to have him travel with Aragorn and then die on the Pelennor fields would have been really heart-wrenching. But oh well, I guess it's a missed opportunity. Anyway, moving on to number 9, we have Baragond. Now Baragond is one of my favorites, and a fan favorite in general. Why? Well, he's just a normal dude, but he fights for what is right, even defying the orders of Denethor and Minas Tirith. Beregond was a man of Gondor and a guard of the Citadel, and in the books, he is the one who saves Faramir's life. While Denethor is inside with the pyre and his son, Beregond defends the doors from multiple servants who are trying to bring fire to the steward. In the process, Beregond even kills 3 of Denethor's servants as they're trying to light the pyre with Faramir on it. Beregond does this out of love and loyalty for Faramir, who he sees as his true captain. Later in the books, Aragorn revokes his title as a guard of the city due to his disobedience to the steward, but because of his actions in saving Faramir's life, he is pardoned from a death sentence. He then became the captain of the guard for Faramir in Ithilien, which eventually became the White Company. Now that all seems well and good, as saving Faramir's life is a pretty big deal, but something that is even greater is the friendship he shows Pippin. The Hobbit comes to the big white city all alone. Gandalf is pretty busy dealing with Denethor the whole time, and so Pippin is thrust into his new role as a servant of the steward without anyone to help him. Enter Beregond. Beregond is the one who shows him around the city, answers all of Pippin's questions, and even invites him to eat with his company. Beregond is just an all-around good guy, and one of the most likable men in the city, and the bravery that Beregond shows helps give courage to Pippin in the absence of Merry. So I was pretty disappointed when Beregond was completely cut from the movies, as he takes up a few chapters in the book, and out of everyone that we're talking about today, he probably is the most involved in the plot. But anyway, we've only got 2 characters left on our list, so let's head into number 10, who is Ghan. This character often slides under the radar as he plays a smaller role in the final book. But again, Tolkien had a way of using even the smallest characters to the greatest effect. So who was Ghan, and what did he do? Well, Ghan was the chieftain of the Druidine, also known as the Wild Men, in the forest surrounding the Pelennor Fields. These people were always looked down upon in general for being less intelligent and more savage, but in reality, they were just different from the men of Gondor, and during the War of the Ring, they had a common enemy, the Orcs. Because of this, as the Rohirrim rode to Minas Tirith, they came upon the wild men of the forest, and Theoden spoke to Ghan. He was informed of the blockades that the orcs had set up, and Ghan offered to guide the entire army of Rohan through an alternate path to the Pelennor. Theoden agreed to this, and the Druidine then led the Rohirrim the back way, which ended up playing into the victory that they had later on. You see, the orcs were expecting them on the main road, and they had all of their attention turned there. Why? Well, in the books, there was a massive wall surrounding the Pelennor Fields. That is something that never got included in the movie. So the enemy didn't think that the Rohirrim could go in through any other way than the main road. But it just so happened that a certain part of the wall was destroyed, and only a small group of orcs were guarding it. Because of this, the Rohirrim were able to sneak in through the gap in the wall and set up their entire forces behind the orc army that was attacking Minas Tirith. This gave them a massive advantage as their attack then became a complete surprise, and all of this can be credited to Ghan. Because of this, Aragorn later decreed after he became king that the force of the Druidon should be left to Ghan and his people in peace, and the men of Gondor and Rohan should no longer invade that space or hunt the wild men. And now to wrap up our list of characters who were omitted from the movies, we have someone who you probably have been thinking about this entire time. Someone that you're probably yelling the name of at your screen right now. Of course, I am talking about Prince Imrahil of Dol Amroth. This character is so epic and so larger than life that he could have had his own movie if he wanted. If anyone in Middle-earth could be on the same level as Aragorn, which is near impossible, Imrahil would be the closest. Similarly to Glorfindel, I can't go into his entire lore and history because Tolkien tells us more about this man than what we just get in the main books, but I will do my best to explain how integral he was in the War of the Ring that we read about in the final book. You see, Prince Imrahil came with one of the largest forces from Dol Amroth to aid Denethor. A big difference between the books and the movies is the fact that in the book, Denethor does ask for aid from all around Gondor, and different towns and cities sent their forces. The men of Dol Amroth are by far the most elite and noble of the lot, and they are led by Prince Imrahil, a man of high standing in Gondor. Similarly to how Beregond saved Faramir's life in the book, Imrahil also saved Faramir's life at one point. Remember when Gandalf rides out to scare off the wraiths and fell beasts when Faramir is trying to get back to the city? Well, in the book, Gandalf does that, but it's only made possible because Prince Imrahil and his men ride out to provide aid. Later, we read that Faramir was struck by a dart from the Haradrim that would have slain him, but Imrahil drove the Haradrim away and personally drew the arrow from Faramir's body and staunched the wound. He then carried Faramir back to the city himself. And this isn't the only key character he saved. Later during the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, Imrahil rode out and saw the procession which was taking Theoden's body back to the city. The catch? In the book, Éowyn had passed out and many thought her dead, so they were taking her back as well with the king. Imrahil went up to pay his respects to the king and saw that Éowyn was still alive. He quickly told the men of Rohan and instructed them to take her to the Houses of Healing immediately. This is what saved her life, as the men of Rohan were just going to leave her next to the king to be buried. But wait a minute, that's not it. Later again, Imrahil came to the aid of Éomer before Aragorn arrived with the ships and was prepared to fight to the death alongside the Rohirrim. Then, after Aragorn saved the day, Imrahil was one of the few with keen sight to see that Aragorn was the true king. Remember, at this point in the book, Aragorn was still hiding his identity. Since this was after the death of Denethor and Faramir was still being healed, Imrahil was put in charge as the next highest-ranking man of Gondor. He knew that Aragorn was the rightful king, and so he suggested that Aragorn take up charge of the city, but Aragorn refused and left the rule to Imrahil for the time being. Then, to wrap it all up, Imrahil played a key role in the final battle as he marched on the Black Gate alongside Aragorn. All in all, Imrahil was just an epic and noble man, who was one of the few who could rival Aragorn in coolness. Maybe that's why Peter Jackson removed him. He would have taken the spotlight away from Aragorn. But anyway, that wraps up today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please be sure to like and subscribe. Stay tuned every week for more Tolkien-related videos, and check out the playlists on my channel to binge watch any other content while you wait. Have a great week, and I'll see you in the next video.